So today I'm going to be talking about a bank that I worked on a hardware asset management project with at GlideFast. So we implemented hardware asset management. They were already like a customer that had ITSM HAM, if you're familiar with ITSM HAM, but we helped them get to HAM Pro. So let's go to the next slide. So in today's presentation, we're going to be talking about who GlideFast is. So who's GlideFast, right? And then we're going to be going over about who the bank is, the bank's HAM journey, so where they started in the maturity scale and where they've got to today. And then we're also going to be talking about what we implemented, so what modules, what features we built for them and what custom integrations we built. And then we're also going to move on to the business outcomes achieved. So what business outcomes did they achieve from the work that we implemented with them and for them using the ServiceNow platform. And then also at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session, so if any of you guys and ladies have any questions, we can answer those. Okay. So who's GlideFast? So GlideFast was founded by ServiceNow customers, so we're an Elite ServiceNow Partner, and we have over 500 consultants that work at the organization. And we're one of the most ServiceNow certified Elite partners in the world. We have over 2,000 years of combined ServiceNow experience. And we have over 1,000 successful ServiceNow projects. And we have over 1,800 ServiceNow certifications across the board with our consultants. Okay, so about the bank, obviously for legal purposes and things like that, we can't mention who the bank is. But they're a large US bank and they have locations in China. So in the US, they've got over 70 physical locations, have over 1,500 employees, and they have over 12,000 plus hardware assets. And I think from a software standpoint too, they have around over 50,000 licenses. So they're a large bank, they have a lot of physical locations. So the bank's HAM journey. So how did the bank get started? So before working with GlideFast, they only had ITSM hardware asset management. So for you that are aware of what ITSM hardware asset management is basically it's the hardware asset management application that's included with ITSM. So you get your basic hardware assets, you get consumables, you get stock rooms, stock rules, and things of that nature. So they really wanted to take on climb up the maturity scale to the next level with hardware asset management. So they approached GlideFast and they wanted us to help them implement Hardware Asset Management Pro. And for those of you that are not aware of Hardware Asset Management Pro, that's really the next level with your HAM journey, right? It has like disposal orders, has the content services library, it has hardware model normalization, RMAs, the list goes on. So really it takes your maturity scale with HAM to the next level so you can really manage your assets from end to end, from cradle to grave. So the good thing about working with this particular bank is they already had a very strong ITAM governance and policies in place. So, when we were working with them, they already had a clear process set up for updating assets, for what happens when assets get disposed, they have an ITAD vendor. So really like rolling out the application, it was just kind of aligning their processes with the correct modules and ensuring that the right people at the company were able to use those modules and align with the bank's processes. So what did we implement for the bank? So as I mentioned earlier, we implemented HAM Pro, but what specifically around HAM Pro did we implement? So we implemented loaner asset orders. So if there's people in here that are not familiar with that, so with HAM Pro, there's basically a feature called loaner asset orders. So for those of you that are deploying assets on a temporary basis, whether it's for contractors or maybe an employee's asset is damaged and you're looking at issuing a temporary issuance of a laptop or a desktop, that's basically what that feature is. So at the bank, when a lot of the end users' laptops were being repaired, they needed temporary laptops to hand out. So we use the out-of-the-box loaner asset orders module to achieve that. And it's very cool, right? You can set like a return date, so it automatically informs IT that this laptop needs to be returned by this date. And then it verifies with the IT organization that this particular asset has been returned and what's the condition. you've got that full end-to-end audit trail. And then we implemented disposal orders. So the bank was already doing dispositions, especially for their hard drives with the sensitive data. The only thing was they didn't really have a digital process to follow to say, okay, take this next step, do this, do that, right? They would just kind of follow in what the industry regulation was, like with ISO 27001. So once we deployed the disposal orders module with HAM Pro, they went from a manner of being, kind of reading a manual on what to do with the system telling them what to do, which was really cool. And for those of you that haven't used disposal orders in ServiceNow, it's very fun to use, it's addictive, it almost feels like a game, right? You select the assets, the tasks come up, it says verify the assets, contact the vendor, that kind of stuff. And it asks you to verify which assets got disposed. Then towards the end, it asks you to attach a disposition report or data destruction report. So that's the disposal orders piece. Then obviously with HAM Pro, you get hardware asset management dashboard. So that's a new feature that came out, I believe, in San Diego. So with that feature, it gives you that whole overall view of your asset operations from a hardware asset management standpoint. So we also did a bit of customization on that too. So they wanted to have more information around their stockroom management operations. So what we did was we built a custom tab onto what we already have with the hardware asset management dashboard. And we added the stockroom dashboard. So the stockroom management dashboard will show you all the assets that are kind of low in stock, which ones need to be replenished, which purchase orders are currently in process, and things of that nature. And the next feature we implemented for them was asset RMA orders. So for those of you that are not familiar with what an RMA is, so an RMA, the acronym stands for Return Merchandise Authorization. So what that is when, say, a laptop, a server, or a computer breaks, and it's under warranty or under a support contract, you need to return that particular asset back to the vendor to either have it repaired, credited, or swapped. So with ServiceNow, with HAM Pro, there's a whole end-to-end workflow. So when an asset is actually broken and it's under coverage from the vendor or the manufacturer, you can return it, and it basically takes you through the whole workflow. It asks you to ship it, what's the shipping number, and then it asks you, did they swap it, did they credit it, and then if you do swap it, it kind of goes off the workflow. So it branches off, which is really nice. It asks you what's the new asset, so you can create the new asset, it retires the old one, and so on and so forth. So it's a very, very good workflow. Not sure, maybe I can get a show of hands. Anyone in here using RMAs today in the system? Come on, there's got to be more of you guys. Oh, there you go. We've got one in the back. All right. I like it. And then the last one that we implemented with HAM Pro is the Advanced Shipment Notifications, ASN. So basically what that is it's a new module with HAM Pro that allows you to upload Excel spreadsheets that come from your vendor. So when you're doing a purchase order, instead of you waiting to receive those assets and to figure out what the serial numbers are, with the new feature with ASNs, they basically give you a spreadsheet and you can drop it into the system and it updates those shell assets that have been created, and you have that heads up ahead of time. So when you're receiving the assets, you don't need to figure out what's the serial number or any of that stuff. You already have the serial numbers in the system, and all you're doing is just doing a three-way match, essentially, saying, okay, do I have this serial number, do I have that one? So it's a very useful feature. And then on to the really exciting stuff I like to talk about. So the Dell warranty integration. So this isn't actually something that comes with HAM Pro or ServiceNow natively. This is something that we built actually at GlideFast for the bank. So what this is it's an integration that pulls in all of the warranty information directly from Dell. So for those of you that are familiar with warranties, some manufacturers, they give you a single warranty, and some they give you multiple line items. So with Dell, you can find a server sometimes and it'll have like 10 warranties on it, because every time you keep purchasing that extended warranty, it's a different line item, it's another line item. And then even when you buy a laptop from Dell out the factory, you'll have like 3 line items. You'll have like one for the battery, one for on-site repair, and so on and so forth. So what we did when we built this integration was we built it on the asset form So when you create a new asset, it basically calls the API, it pulls it in, and it lists it on the contracts tab. So we have like a generic Dell warranty contract tab, or generic Dell warranty contract, and then we link it under assets covered. So now you can go to an asset and you can see all those line items, which is super cool. And then to keep that data up to date is we then added a scheduled job. So every Saturday of the week, what it does is it hits that API for all the existing assets. So then if additional warranties have been purchased between creating the asset in the system and today, those new warranties are going to come in to the system, and you have that visibility. So this saved the bank a lot of time, because they had over 25,000 Dell assets. And I think once we imported all the warranties, there's over 100,000 warranty line items. So to manually go to the Dell website, put in the service tag, do the capture code, pull it out, we're talking months, years of time to do that. And then to maintain that, it's a full-time job. So automating that was very good. And then last but not least, this is another one of my favorites. So with Ham Pro, there is an asset audits module. So for the bank, they perform a yearly audit. Obviously, because they're in the financial sector, they have to perform an audit of all of their assets at all their physical locations. So originally, this wasn't even part of the project. We had some hours left, and I kind of saw that there was an issue where they were telling me how many hours they were spending a year performing these audits, thousands of hours. And it was very manual, right? The auditors come in, they don't have access to ServiceNow. They didn't want them to have access to ServiceNow because they were worried about what data they could see and things of that nature. So the way their audit process would work is they would export the data from ServiceNow for each branch, give the Excel spreadsheets to the auditors, and then they would print them off. And then they would go through physically and check off the assets that they would find and write down any discrepancies. And then after that, they would then send all the audit results back to the HQ, and then the ITAM team would spend like 3 to 4 months processing the discrepancies, figuring out, this asset was missing, this asset was assigned to this person, but it should be assigned to this person. So there's a whole load of discrepancies, and that whole process takes apparently like 2,000 to 3,000 hours a year across multiple teams. So with the leftover hours we had on the project, I said, hey, why don't we build a custom like branch auditing application? And Ham Pro already had an asset auditing application, but it wasn't that advanced. I wanted something that would actually create remediation tasks where you could automatically remediate the discrepancies and make those changes and have a full audit trail. So we basically built this custom asset auditing application. So you could literally, what it would do is with the scheduled job, it would create an audit record for every single branch once a year on like the 1st of January, for example. And then when the auditors would log into the system, they would already have their audits assigned to them. So when they logged into ServiceNow, all they see is just the audits assigned to the branches that they're going to. And it was very easy. The way we made it is they literally didn't have to think. They log in, they see the audits assigned to them, and then for each branch, they see all the expected assets, and then they just basically flag them. I found it, I didn't find it. And then when you flag an asset as found, it's checked off, it's good. And if you didn't find it, what we did was we created remediation tasks that say, I get assigned to the ITAM group saying this particular asset was not found at this location. Either like ping the IP address to figure out where it is, or go manually investigate what happened to this particular asset. So from a compliance standpoint and data security, this proved very well because the bank is then able to investigate potentially lost or stolen assets. And you see it in the news all the time, right? When data through ITAD or missing assets gets breached, it's all over the news and there's big fines. So this definitely helped them a lot from a compliance standpoint and process standpoint. Then other remediation tasks. So if the assigned to user was different than the one in the system, what we did in the modules, we created like a many-to-many table so you could then track who the new assigned to person was. So that even though the auditor was making changes to the asset data, or at least it looked like it, they weren't actually making changes to the asset record. It was set in this many-to-many table. Then at the end, the asset manager, when they review it and they're okay with it, they can hit this UI action we created, and it would actually update all of the assets. And that action was only available for the asset management team. It wasn't available for the auditors. So it's kind of like it gave the auditors enough control, but not too much to be able to actually make changes and to go a step far. Then another piece that we added to this auditing application was the ability for auditors to create new assets. So again, it was kind of smoke and mirrors. It looked like you were creating a new asset, but it was actually creating like a task. But we created a view on the task, so when it popped up in a modal, we had all of the asset fields on the task. So when you created that, it then just created a remediation task to say, go and create this new asset that the auditor, Joe Bloggs found, right, at this branch. So yeah, that application was very exciting. It was interesting because that was one of the most successful things we did in the project, and it wasn't even initially part of the project. It was just kind of the cream on the cake, right? So I think we have a question over here. So.
So the question is, who owns the last bullet point that you have around custom advanced hardware asset auditing? Is it GlideFast? Is it ServiceNow? How does that work together?
Yeah, so it's actually a GlideFast. So we made it available now for other customers that wish to consume it. So I guess if you're interested in learning more, stop by the booth and we can chat. All right, any more questions right now? Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. So actually, most of these slides are just kind of showing you what we did here for the custom auditing application. So you can see it easily verifies that assets exist in a specific branch or location, and it automatically detects and flags discrepancies. Then you can remediate those discrepancies. See if we've got any better screenshots. So here you can see what I was talking about. So when that audit record is generated, you already have your expected assets down on the bottom left, and then you have the assets to audit on the right. So that's the remaining assets that require to be audited. And as you mark each asset as found, obviously the assets start to drop off that tab, so the number gets smaller. And you have assets not found, assets audited, and then you have your assets audit tasks. So they're those remediation tasks. And we locked down certain fields, so obviously you can't tamper with them. And we did some calculations too on the audit stats. So you can see how many assets are expected, audited, found, and then assets with discrepancies. So from an audit standpoint, the discrepancy field is really good because then auditors, internal auditors and compliance are able to run reports and say, out of all the audits we do on average, how many discrepancies are we finding? Then you can see we've got that create new asset UI action under the related links. So what that does is you click that, and then a modal pops up where the auditor can create that asset. Well, technically a task, but they think it's an asset. Okay, so the business outcomes we achieved with the bank. So after going live with HAM Pro, the bank was able to achieve the following business outcomes. So apart from the auditing piece, obviously we did the whole HAM Pro, and we worked on their onboarding for new hires. So for faster employee onboarding for new hires, we worked on the new hire catalog, so they had some issues where lots of duplicate fields, duplicate catalog items, and things like that. And one thing I'd like to mention from a HAM standpoint, like one issue I've seen across a lot of clients, and we solved for this particular bank too, was that when you publish like a hardware model to the catalog, if you follow the procurement flow and the sourcing tasks, you have to give out an asset from that model, right? You can't like switch it up and say, well, you requested a 17-inch MacBook, we only have a 15-inch. So what we did was we actually modified the workflow. So when that sourcing task comes in, we added a field so you can actually pick a new model and a new asset. So then that way, it gives IT a bit more control over, okay, you asked for a 17-inch MacBook, but maybe that MacBook is only for developers and you're, a teller or something at a bank, right? So we're going to give you a Windows device. So we created it so it's very flexible. So if you request device A, we can give you B, C, or D, right? And that's a typical issue I see across a lot of clients that we've worked with. There's no easy way to deploy, assets and give the end users different selections and things like that. Other business outcomes, so we decreased the time spent performing asset audits and processing remediation. So that was through the asset audit application that we built. Then we increased visibility of all their hardware assets. So they already had Microsoft SCCM, and what we did with the Service Graph Connector is we connected that to their ServiceNow instance. So they're now, instead of manually having to update those hardware asset records and the CIs related to them, we're able to integrate that data and have more visibility around the locations where the assets are at, who's the assigned to, and who's the last logged in, right? And that's one cool thing with SCCM is it tracks like the last logged in, because a lot of clients we'd noticed they were putting the last logged in as the assigned to, which is kind of wrong because, if IT's working on 100 machines, the IT guy is going to have 100 assets assigned to him, so. Okay, and then a smoother end of life and retirement process for all end user devices. So I touched a little on the ITAD process, the IT asset disposition, with the disposal orders in ServiceNow. But we also helped them with the retirement process. So we put in policies to say, every 3 years from the purchase date, create a report to suggest that these assets should be brought in as an end of life and then replaced. So we did that. Then increase flexibility during the asset request and fulfillment process. So I kind of touched on that already. So what that is basically when you have that task to source and fulfill the request, it gives the flexibility of the IT team to then be able to swap the asset to a different one or the model, right? And then stronger source of truth by removing and cleaning up duplicate asset records. This is one of the biggest pain points you see across a lot of organizations, and I see it every day with clients, is, you log in, you got 3 laptops the same with the same serial numbers. It's a nightmare. So what I did was I created a business rule on the asset table. So when you go to create a new asset, it checks to see if the serial number, if there's already an existing asset with the same serial number and the same manufacturer, and if there is, abort the action, pop up a message, and stop the creation of that asset. And it's interesting because when we were building that, it was kind of weird at first because when you create an asset, it creates a CI too. So at first when I was building it, it was really weird because you would create the asset, it would stop the asset from being created, but then the CI would be created like an orphan CI. So we actually added to the logic where it aborts that business rule, so then you don't have orphan CIs. But yeah, I highly suggest implementing that. I know it doesn't come out of the box, but it's like a 20-minute business rule. It's the best thing that'll save your life. I did that on the asset tag as well. So not just the serial number, we did it on the asset tag. So same thing there. All right, perfect timing. I got 5 minutes left. Enough time for questions. All right, who has questions? No question? Oh, okay, here we go. We have a question at the front now.
I'm going to do my best to repeat that. He was saying that you had a lot of tracking for the PCs, but you also had a branch network, over 70 locations. What was the process for tracking those locations and the assets around that?
Did you do more tracking outside of PCs around like network gear at these different branch locations and implement those in the ham, and what was your strategy around that?
Not really. So most of the project was end user devices like computers, monitors, printers, things like that. We didn't really touch the networking devices. Yeah, but that's a good question. We did like import some of their Cisco SmartNet contracts so they had visibility on the switches and things like that from a support standpoint, but yeah, we didn't really get into the whole networking piece too much. Good question.
The question is, did you use anything else other than SSCM as a source for tracking?
I don't believe so. We just use SCCM. Yeah. I know like some customers, they use an Intune as well. Maybe they're using like a land sweeper. They have discovery. Then there's like security applications and stuff that people are integrating with as well. I tend to find when they integrate with all those different tools, they're all just getting little different pockets of data. And then when you integrate with like 4 different tools, you get that whole holistic picture.
A question back here, how big of a factor was being successful with the ITSM helpful in being successful with this?
Was the question, how did the ITSM component affect being successful with this?
How big of a factor was the fact that your process was already mature? Yeah, your process.
Well, one thing I always tell clients is, you know, with ITAM, it's 80% process and 20% technology, so definitely helped a lot. So a lot of clients I've worked with before, you know, the processes are very immature or they've been implemented incorrectly. So, you know, the system is not like going to fix their problems, right? The system is supposed to kind of, you know, elevate what they're doing. So, yeah, my best recommendation is to, you know, figure out your internal processes, policies, and all that kind of stuff first, and then approach the system with those in mind. Another question in the front.
It sounds like you did a lot of customizations on ServiceNow. How did you handle those customizations in terms of upgrades?
That's a good question. So with like the Dell warranty integration, we built it in a way where it's like, we're not really affecting the out-of-the-box functionality. We're kind of elevating it and adding extras on top of it. So for example, for the Dell one, you know, we made sure that we were using the out-of-the-box contracts module, the out-of-the-box line items against an asset. So literally for that one, it really wasn't a whole lot of customization. It was just essentially bringing in a new data feed, a couple of business rules, and then populating it. So the upgrades, I don't foresee any issues with that. And then for the custom auditing application, that's kind of like a standalone scoped app. So I'm not too worried about that. Like it references the asset table, users, departments, that kind of stuff. So I don't think there'll really be any issues with, you know, using that.
Okay. So question here around whether there was any mobile device or scanning built into the auditing feature that you had.
Any mobile device? You mean from like an auditing standpoint, using a mobile device? Yeah, we actually haven't got around to that piece yet. That was one thing we were wanting to use, similar to what they use with Ham Pro. But I think it's kind of like a ServiceNow proprietary feature in the app to be able to use that scanning. So we're going to have to figure that one out another time.
There's a vendor that does it.
Oh, there is?
In the store.
Yeah, I think I know them.
So the question is whether you did any bulk purchasing or purchasing of PCs through integrations with the vendors. Yeah.
So the question is, do we do bulk purchasing with PCs with the vendors?
PCs.
Through ServiceNow or just in general?
Through integrations with...
No, we're not. Yeah, the customer wasn't that advanced, but I've been working with some customers that are looking to implement like a CDW API, so they can get a quotation directly from a request, and then they can hit purchase, and then it actually makes it using their credentials. All right. And if anyone here has any questions, I love ham. I love talking about ITAM. I'll be in the vendor booth area. You can come stop by and see us at the GlideFast booth. All right.